It looks like the A woman pastor has something to say about all of the controversy that he's found himself in recently. Now, as you know, I recently did a couple of videos on the strange prayer that this apparent Christian pastor made during the congressional prayer, where he seemed to pray in the name of Brahma and ended the prayer with Amen and Awomen. But after becoming an internet sensation, the pastor claimed that his prayer was misunderstood. And in response to the backlash, he claimed that he's in shock that so many people seem to take his message the wrong way. Now, here's what he said. I concluded with a lighthearted pun in recognition of the record number of women who will be representing the American people in Congress during this term, as well as in recognition of the first female chaplain of House of Representatives whose service commenced this week. I personally find these historic occasions to be blessings from God, for which I am grateful. Cleaver said that he was deeply disappointed that my prayer has been misrepresented and misconstrued by some to fit a narrative that strokes resentment and greater division among portions of our population. Rather than reflecting on my faithful request for community, healing, and revision from our increasingly tribal tendencies, it appears that some have latched onto the final word of this conversation in an attempt to twist my message to God and demean me personally. In doing so, they have proven one point of my greater message, that we are all soiled by selfishness, perverted by prejudice, and inveigled by ideology. Now, first off, I do appreciate a call for people to unite in this politically charged atmosphere. I've said the same thing in other videos. But the reason why people focus so much on the last part of his prayer is because that's the part that sounded ridiculous on the face of it. But I will say that he does make a fair point in that we do have a tendency to focus on something that people that we disagree with say without giving equal consideration to the larger message that they're trying to get across. So we ain't going to do that today. In light of his complaint, we're going to focus on what he calls the greater point of his broader message, and we'll see if that helps him or if it actually works against him. The pastor claims that his broader message is that we're all soiled by selfishness, perverted by prejudice, and inveigled by ideology. And by the way, inveigled is just another way of saying seduced or being deceived. Now, this is true, and I won't act as if we're all not guilty of this at times. And I'm sure that all of us can find countless examples of this without trying too hard. For example, take Exhibit A. The A-woman pastor himself, Emmanuel Cleaver. In my opinion, if anyone is deceived by an ideology, it's this guy, and his closing prayer was a perfectly prime example of it. But before we can even get into that, right off the bat, the pastor put all of us in somewhat of an awkward position. Because if we're all being deceived by an ideology, then what are we supposed to do with what he claims is the main point of his broader message, since the message is itself an ideology? This puts us in a bad position because if we're going to take his advice, then we need to wonder if we should reject his ideology, given that he believes we're all deceived by ideologies. But leaving that aside, he seems to be pushing the idea that the world would become more inclusive and harmonious if we just accepted everyone's conception of God as true and realized that there really aren't any differences in our conceptions of God after all. The idea is that this should lead to more harmony and stop people from being excluded. But really, instead of getting rid of exclusion, it actually creates a more dangerous kind of exclusion. The reason why is because everyone has a view of the world that they think is true. No matter who they are, they think that the world is more so one way and less so like another way. To keep it simple, we can say that people fall into one of four groups. Either they believe that all religions are true, all religions are false, one religion or belief system is true, or they're just undecided. So if the pastor believes that all religions have the truth and this is a way to include everyone, then he's already excluded everyone who doesn't fall into the same group that he does. He's excluding all of the people who believe that all religions are false, all of the people that believe that one religion or belief system is true, and all of the people who are undecided. This leads directly to tribalism, the thing that he claims he's trying to avoid. Now, it's true that if more people adopted his view, then that could lead to a far larger tribe of people who are on the same page than what we see right now, but that's the reason that such an ideology is even more of a bad idea. Because what he'll end up doing is just creating smaller and more marginalized groups who will be rejected and dismissed simply because they don't fit in or think the way that he thinks. And I could be wrong, but my assumption is that he would say that he's actually against the oppression of marginalized groups of people. So the fact that he thought that this ideology is a way to go against tribalism when it actually creates the tribalism shows that he's been deceived by his own ideology. So without even getting into the other two claims that he made, no matter how you look at it, This guy's been deceived by an ideology, and unfortunately, his ideology led him to reject the ideology that actually could solve the problem that he's trying to solve. The ideology that actually could work is found in Christianity, because what we need isn't an ideology that encourages people to pretend that there aren't any practical differences between them and other people, but instead, what we need is an ideology that tells you to love people despite those differences. One that doesn't act as if there will never be people who are your enemies, but instead, one that tells you to love those people who are your enemies, and so on. That's the real way to have harmony in society. Not by ignoring or refusing to acknowledge differences, or even by forcing people to suppress the differences. Instead, it's by learning to love each other and to respect each other despite the differences. Now, I could go on, but you get my point. The thing is, with those of us that are Christians, when we're misled by some sort of ideology that we place above the gospel, not only do we eventually end up at a dead end, but we miss the significant implications of what the gospel means for our everyday lives. And that's exactly what I talk about in this video. So go ahead and click right here so you can see what I mean. But the next time you hear someone claiming that removing differences is the best way to bring harmony, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?